So again, this is the our informational webinar about the Climate Adaptation Science Center fiscal year 2022 funding opportunity. And we're talking today specifically about the North Central's, the North Central region funding opportunity. This is a CASC-wide funding opportunity, so we'll get a little bit more into what the CASC network looks like and consists of, but we have regions scattered across the country, 9 different regions. We're all participating in this together. So today we're going to talk specifically about the North Central CASC's science priorities and the way that we run things here in this region. Elisa, next slide, please. So what we'll go through with everyone today is the eligibility requirements. We have some pretty specific eligibility requirements for the CASC network funding opportunities, and how you do submit your statements of interest and full invited proposals. And then we'll go through that schedule and the flow of the submissions. And then we'll get more specifically into our science approach and those priority topics that we're going to be calling for, as well as our evaluation review criteria and the anticipated deliverables. And then we'll have time for the Q&A at the end. Next slide, thanks. So actually, I'm going to not read off the slide because I just realized that we haven't told you who the CASC network is. And what we're all about. So I'm gonna do that off slide. So the Climate Adaptation Science Centers are federal university partnerships. And on the federal side, we are run out of the U.S. Geological Survey, which is a bureau of the Department of the Interior. So you'll kind of see, or you should see in the document and when we're going through this presentation today, that we do have a heavy focus on DOI bureaus and as well as tribes. We have a important trust responsibility to tribes in our regions, and we work very, very closely with them. So you will see a focus on other DOI bureaus like the National Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management. And it's important that we are serving those, our partners in those bureaus, as well as others in the sort of climate adaptation community. So anyway, that's the federal side. Then we also have a university side. Each of the CASCs, each region has a regional university host, as well as a consortium, a group of consortium institutions, and that makes up our university consortium. And in the North Central region, our host is the University of Colorado Boulder. And now I'm back on slide here, and you can see with the eligibility criteria, that is folks that are researchers within this larger university host consortium. So you see all the partners here. That's University of Colorado Boulder, Conservation Science Partners, the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, South Dakota State University, University of Montana, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. So if you're a researcher, a PI, or even a postdoc, a student at one of those schools, depending on how your school allows you to apply, if you're allowed to be the lead PI on funding from one of those schools, you're eligible to apply through this funding opportunity. Also, if you're a USGS researcher, you work at a USGS Science Center, Research Center, Cooperative Research Unit, Field Station, et cetera, you are also eligible to apply. Now, that seems like a kind of those are sort of strict barriers there, but we have a lot of ways that others can also kind of participate in this funding opportunity. So any federal, state, tribal, NGO, et cetera, partner may participate and receive funding as a co-investigator, and those will be through subawards or contracts or interagency agreements as appropriate. So interagency agreements being for other federal scientists. So you can be a partner, but again, the person who is submitting the statement of interest and then invited full proposal must come from one of the those eligible entities above the line there on the slide. The host universities will then be responsible for transfer of funds to consortium institutions and others. On the USGS side, we'll do what we call a change of allocation from the North Central CASC to your science center. So that's how that piece of it works. And then just the last bullet, the PI's institution is responsible for transfers of subawards and contracts to other partners. So I know there'll probably be some more questions about that, but we're going to move on from there, and you can put your questions in the chat, or we can talk about them after the presentation. So for this particular funding opportunity, we have potentially our available funds for this one will be up to $1.7 million for FY22. That's definitely an estimate. It's very much dependent on our congressional budget and our allocation, but right now that's what we're estimating we'll have available to start new projects in FY22. For each project, the individual award should not exceed $350,000 for the life of the project. And generally, the project durations, the projects that we fund are about 24 to 36 months, and they should not exceed 36 months. The project start dates can be a little bit difficult for us to give you a very nailed down date on. Again, because it has much to do with the passage of a full year budget by Congress, as well as whatever sort of internal approval processes the department and the USGS are sort of imposing on us at any one time. But at the very least, the project start dates will be no sooner than 60 days after passage of a full year budget. And that's, like I said, about as good as we can give you at the moment in terms of what those project start dates would look like. And just the very last, sorry, what I said there was for USGS. The consortium schools should expect start dates no sooner than July of 2022. So we are talking about, planning for about a year in advance here. So just keep that in mind as you create your budgets and your timelines. Schedule of submissions, very important. Our due dates here are Eastern Standard Time. So just take a look and make note of that. So that'll be 3 p.m. Mountain Time. So the first deadline that you all will be interested in is that deadline for submission of statements of interest, which is March 19th. Then we'll go through our review process of those statements of interest and then invite full proposals. We'll let you all know and invite full proposals by about April 22nd. That's our planned date. And then your invited full proposals will be due on July 23rd, again, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Mountain. And we intend to notify PIs of intent to award around September 8th. That's our planned date. Next slide. Just a note that intent to award means that we have selected the project for funding pending completion of all our sort of administrative reviews and approval processes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the final funding actions cannot occur until Congress has put into place a FY22 budget. We've had a lot of delays with this. Obviously, probably don't need to tell anybody on this call. You're all aware that Congress hasn't passed a budget on time for a long time. So that has definitely delayed a lot of our funding in the last couple of years. So just be aware of that. Next slide. I am going to turn it over, I think at this point, to Elisa Wade, who is the North Central CASC Research Coordinator, to start digging a little bit more into the details of this. And she's going to talk you through the flow of the submissions and how this works. Yeah, Elisa, do you want to take it from here? And then feel free to bounce the ball back to me, Elisa, at any time, but I'll let you talk through this slide at least.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to be looking over here because that's where my slides are. So I'm not just being aloof here. All right. So flow of submissions. So the PIs will first submit a statement of interest, and that's a 2-page statement of interest as per the schedule that Nicole went over. And that goes through what is called RFP Manager, which is online our USGS specific online or CASC specific submission portal. All the information on how to access that and get into it should be inside that RFP document, inside our funding opportunity document. So there's a lot of information there. You do not need to go through your host institution if you're a consortium member for the statement of interest. We do recommend you let the host institution know that you are thinking about submitting. If you're a consortium partner, so if you're at one of the universities or nonprofits at part of our consortium, you might want to let CU Boulder know, but it is not required and you do not need to go through them. You will want to have a conversation with them to make sure you understand all overhead costs, pass-through costs, et cetera, and the implications for your proposed budget. The USGS folks can go straight through RFP Manager as well. Once proposals are invited, those are also submitted through RFP Manager. The full proposals must go through RFP Manager for everybody involved. If you are awarded and fully funded, then if you are a USGS member, then we pass money straight through change of allocation, as we talked about before. But a consortium proposal must go through the host university. There'll be a separate process at which the host university, CU Boulder, will contact you and work with you to get your proposal fully submitted up through grants.gov. It's a second layer that's required by the Department of Interior and the federal government for making grants and cooperative agreements. And we will determine whether that's a grant or cooperative agreement at that point. So just making sure you understand that there's kind of a two-layer process. If you're USGS, it's pretty simple. You go straight through RFP Manager both times. If you're a consortium member, you go through RFP Manager for both the statement of intent as a statement of interest, as well as the full proposal. But then there will be, if you are successful, a second process of going through grants.gov. That kind of catches people out sometimes. So, all right. So I want to get into some of the really interesting stuff, which is the science. And I want to make sure folks are aware that they should look at Appendix F, I believe it is, inside the RFP, inside this funding opportunity announcement. That's an important place to start and to read. And that talks a lot about our science approach. The NC CASC is really quite dedicated to seeking to fund projects that are for actionable science. So we look to support climate-informed management of fish and wildlife and their habitat that has the end user in mind. We don't have any specific approach that we require that you take in order to achieve your actionable science, but we really recommend you think about what that looks like when you work with partners and stakeholders in order to make sure your science is actionable and that it's informing a specific decision or planning process that the request for that science somehow came from a management agency themselves. And in Appendix F, you can see there's kind of this, we have a spectrum of ideas about how you might engage or work with partners or stakeholders. And we don't suggest there's one right answer. We do suggest that it's important that you proactively think through why you're approaching it in a certain way, and justify that that's the best approach for the type of science and outputs that you'll be providing through your project. So moving into our priority topics that we'll be funding for this fiscal year 22, and I will note that this funding announcement is being broadcast for the entire network, and all the different regional CASCs are also part of that, of the funding announcement, but you will be submitting to an individual CASC, regional CASCs. We can talk a little bit more about if you want to submit to more than one regional CASC in a few minutes, but that each regional CASC has its own independent science priority topics, and some of them may overlap, but some of them may not. So these are the North Central CASC's funding priority topics. The first one is fish, wildlife, and their habitats under changing climate, kind of a general bucket, but we thought through some very specific ideas that we are primarily interested under here, and we would be most seeking for funding. And that is topics about habitat loss and refugia under a changing climate, changes in habitat connectivity, looking at species or vulnerability or habitat vulnerability, and then how habitat and species distributions or phenology might change into the future. A second topic is on the future of hydrologic flows. Here we're looking for work that covers not only the changes in flow amount and timing, also and or temperature of flows. We have three kind of areas that we're really interested in here. The first is a model agnostic approach to understanding what is available. A lot of times our partners know that the data are probably out there, but they're not really sure what's out there, how to access it, what are the best different models that one might use to answer different types of questions. So some type of review and synthesis of the existing models and best applications thereof. We're also potentially interested in development of novel data or methods that are responsive to a need that's identified by a manager, a natural cultural resource manager in our region. And then also looking another piece of that pie, that puzzle, of the puzzle for thinking about making sure that it's actionable, is thinking about how, if the data do exist and we know they are available and that there's a best approach for using them, are they really accessible? A lot of times the managers are really stretched thin, and both from staffing, funding, et cetera. And so really helping them think through and providing really accessible entry points into using and applying the data. I will note on this topic that we're really looking for concepts, and this is true for everything we do. This is part of our science approach, is that we tend to try to want to look outside of like a single basin or a single decision that needs to be made, and either be able to let somebody in, that either be able to say if it's a broad geography, or if it's not a broad geography, really be able to articulate how this work would be applicable to a broader question or decision planning process. All right, and then our final science priority topic is ecological transformation in extremes. So really starting to think about the fact that moving beyond climate impacts, but what could happen, what are plausible outcomes, and what are likely key thresholds for where systems flip. There's a true transformation and shift in what's on the ground and what that means. The National Park Service recently came out with a report looking at and describing what has been being worked on by a group of federal partners, which is the RAD framework, so resist, accept, and direct, and thinking about how that can be applied in for management. So in the past, we've largely thought about historical conditions and managing for those historical conditions, but starting to really think about what might that need to look like if we can't ever get back. And that's no longer tractable to be trying to return to historical conditions. We can do treatments to resist, but there are some places where that may not be the best approach, and maybe accepting that change or directing it to a more favorable, amenable ecosystem response. And you can look at that report, the RAD report, online if you'd like to get more information about that. A third piece on that one, it would be kind of identifying those systems that are at high risk of transformation, and what are the best kind of adaptation options or amenable options for alternatives that helping people move forward. So really this idea of transformation extremes and thinking through the RAD framework. All right, so those are our science priority topics. We also have several cross-cutting themes of interest that we're potentially interested in, that we are interested in seeing. These are not required pieces of any of the proposals, but you get a little bonus point if you respond to any of these as well. And so the first one would be advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that can either be through the way science is approached, it could be by improving DEI in the workforce, et cetera. So another one is addressing human dimensions of climate adapted, natural, and cultural resource management. So this might be things like adding ecological or sociological assessments of what are opportunities and barriers to adaptation. Third one would be improving our understanding of how climate adaptation moves, not only for how that science moves, not only into the planning and decision-making process, but then how do we ensure that that actually gets placed on the ground? We often have a number of partners who do a really excellent job and scientists who really do a really excellent job of translating their science into a plan, but what can we do or evaluate or monitor to really help make sure that then it also gets implemented on the ground for actual affecting change. A fourth one is implementing innovative outreach efforts. This is kind of a big one for, as you can see, about the idea about actionable science, is about really thinking about how we might translate the science into tools, information, syntheses. And then lastly, the North Central CASC and the CASCs at large often are asked by our partners to help them to build capacity and to do trainings. And so thinking about not only are there trainings that you might provide to really help translate, that's linked to that idea about translating the science, but also are there modules that would result, are there things that would result from your research that would provide really excellent modules like case studies, best management practices, et cetera, that we could internalize at the CASC and kind of create a portfolio, a slide deck of that we use in our trainings that we're constantly going out and talking to folks. Okay, so I'm going to jump now. I know I'm going fast here, but jump now into the review criteria. So the statement of interests are pretty short, and you'll notice that there are 4 review criteria. The first 2 are 70% of the weighting. So you want to pay attention to those. And it's just the third bullet is scientific merit. That's 25%. It certainly is not to say that you don't want to have robust quality science that you're proposing, but we really want to make a case and a point, but we can't put a too fine a point on the fact that we're really looking for applicability to our priority science needs and that coordination with partners and stakeholders for actionable science. So really think about that quite a bit. You'll notice also the last bullet is 5% is retained as kind of that's the extra boost if you cover a cross-cutting theme in your SOI. All right, then when we move on to, if you are invited to a full proposal and you're asked to submit one of those, we tend to try to request often about, we try to fund about 1 in 3 full proposals. So we don't ask everybody to, we try to save you time and effort by only asking for those SOIs that really rise to the top to move into the full proposal stage. And at that point, again, the bins are fairly similar for our evaluation criteria. The top 2 are 50% of those same ones, right? The applicable, I can't say the word, applicability to priority science needs, and then coordination with science, with partners and stakeholders. Then scientific merit boosts up to 20%. And then we look at study team qualifications, budget and work plan, and the additional 10% there for those cross-cutting themes. All proposals must at that time have a data management plan. That's purely binary. You either have it or you don't, you must have it. And then finally, our final slide here today is talking about the deliverables that are required from all projects. So just having those, if you were to be successful and be successfully funded, just knowing what's coming down the road here a little bit, is that you must have a data management plan, as we said, and we will work with you. We have a data steward with the North Central CASC, all the CASCs have one, and they will work with you to help you get your DMP up and meeting all of the CASC requirements. And it really just outlines the types of input data that you'll likely be using, and then what data will come out of it, what kind of publicly available data will come out of it, publications, et cetera, tools, data, code, et cetera. And we can talk about, we do recognize not everything needs and can be made publicly available, and we can discuss that with you. You also will have an annual report due for projects that are over a year. They're due 60 days before the end of the year, and they're really just making sure that you're have satisfactory annual progress as you're moving forward before the next year of funding. Final reports are due 90 days at the end of the project, and those are made public. And so those are the final kind of output summary of what you've done, in addition to all the products we'll be expecting after 90 days. And then I almost always host a mid-year, it's generally a phone call, very informal, check-in, how things going, what's any problems and what's going on. So it's not a particularly onerous mid-year review. So I think with that, I will turn it over to questions and answers. I think, Aparna, if you could stop recording.